Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. We are back with some more Q. Today we are talking about smoke and mirrors. Some tricks are better than others. John, if I were a new Q post, how many of me would there be?
7.
Yes, 3507 was where we last left you, 44 minutes after the hour of 12. Q says smoke and mirrors, and we got that in brackets. How do you attempt to keep the narrative in play? Control the sheep, and we get this Fox News link right here. Dems pursue impeachment investigation with bid for grand jury info. Insist Mueller delivered.
Stop it. Get some help.
Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee said Friday they are proceeding with what they called an impeachment investigation, as they insisted former special counsel Robert Mueller delivered damning testimony against President Trump in this week's hearing, despite concerns from many on the left that his appearance was faltering and broke little new ground. As a major next step, Chairman Gerald Nadler and the committee filed a petition in D.C. federal court on Friday to obtain grand jury materials from the former special counsel's investigation. The petition claims the panel needs the information in order to determine whether to recommend articles of impeachment in an attempt to give the request more weight in the eyes of the court, to meaningfully consider whether to exercise this authority, as well as to exercise its other pressing legislative and oversight responsibilities. The committee must obtain evidence and testimony in a timely manner, the filing reads. Nadler called the grand jury materials critically important for their investigation. In the petition, Democrats on the committee noted that because Justice Department policies do not allow the prosecution of a sitting president, the House of Representatives is the only institution of the federal government that can hold Trump accountable. Okay, so we've got information sitting in a grand jury. And of course, grand jury information is classified because the grand jury needs to look it over. The grand jury is responsible for deciding whether or not any kind of investigation, or really not even investigation so much, whether or not this goes to court or not. So you never turn that kind of stuff over. This kind of stuff should be taught in Civics 101, right? And of course, Gerald Nadler wants to get this. And listen to this. I mean, this makes all the sense right here. Essentially, they're saying that they need the evidence in order to start an investigation. And if you need evidence to start an investigation, you had nothing in the first place. All right, so let me just sum up the Mueller testimony right here. Could have gone better. This is the key sentence here, according to Q. Nadler called the grand jury materials critically important for their investigation. Yeah. Imagine that. Does Nadler understand that the critically important material requested would be illegal for AG Barr to disclose? You bet he does. That's exactly why he wants it, because he knows if he gets it, it will cancel and negate everything, all that information that's going on. And you heard it from Mueller himself during the testimony that there is still a lot of investigation going on. Straight up, it's classified until it's not. And it sucks for us too, because we want to know. But at the end of the day, if we want to get any kind of arrests that are going to stick, this is how it's got to get done. Now we get this link to the National Review, and it says court ruling implies that Barr must redact grand jury info from Mueller report. Democrats will complain, and they will, but the Attorney General can't be faulted for following the law. In disclosing the Mueller report, Attorney General William Barr will have to redact grand jury information. This is the upshot of the ruling today by a divided panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. And let me just bring you to the crux of the matter here. At issue was this question: Does a federal court have the authority to order disclosure of grand jury materials if the judge decides that the interests of justice warrant doing so? Or is the judge limited to the exceptions to grand jury secrecy that are spelled out in Rule 6E of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure? The D.C. Circuit's McKeever ruling holds that the text of Rule 6E controls. Well, there you go. Consequently, judges have no authority to authorize disclosure outside the rule. And here's what Q wants us to see here. This means Attorney General Barr must redact grand jury material from the Mueller report before disclosing it to Congress. Democrats will complain long and loud about this, but I don't see how Barr can be reasonably faulted for following the law. Congress, after all, has the power to legislate an amendment to Rule 6E that would permit a disclosure of grand jury materials from a special counsel investigation to appropriate congressional committees. Okay, well, if they have that power to legislate the amendment, how come they haven't done that, right? Will members of the Democrat Party Congress attempt to amend Rule 6E in order to obtain grand jury material deemed critically important? I doubt it. No. Logical thinking. Why? Because it's still going to expose really what's going on. Look. Even if you get the information the wrong way, the information's still going to come out. They don't want it to come out. All they really want to do is tie the courts up in minutia long enough to try and think of something else. We know this already. They don't really want to accomplish anything other than just tying us up in the courts. Why paint a narrative that the one item you cannot possess is the one item you need in order to justify your argument? For the same reason that people will, like if you ever see two men that don't want to fight and they kind of get in this little shoving match and you know that neither one of them wants to swing because neither one of them wants to get into a fight. Can't blame them. But they just don't want to back down. Hold me back, bro. That's what they're doing. Hold me back, bro. People elected knowingly spreading false information, disinformation. Yeah, of course they are. Of course they are. And they're all getting the same talking points from the same people until they get orders to do something next. They don't really know what they're going to do. They were hoping the Mueller thing was going to turn out great. Didn't turn out so well for them. So now they got to move towards impeachment. And impeachment is really the only thing that they want. And they're using this premise in order to support that. Well, the fact of the matter is that even if they get that information, it's going to be damning on them. They don't really want it because they're holding me back, bro. Puppets follow orders. Think for yourself. Q. Let's move on. Post 3508, 50 minutes after the hour of well, looks like they're all aboard the Lolita Express. Q gives us this Rolling Stone link right here. Who is British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's longtime partner? This article is from July 9th, 2019. It's been going around Twitter for quite some time. I imagine a lot of you have already read it. But basically, it just talks about a little bit about her background, and we've talked quite a bit about it as well. She comes from a very wealthy father, British media mogul, and he was part of the Daily Mirror, which was a real big deal. And of course, he had a lot of ties to different things like Mossad, MI6. He was long suspected, and that was really no big secret. That was kind of public knowledge. Also, it mentions here that she was educated at the prestigious Marlborough boarding school in the UK. They always seem to be going to these crazy schools. Now, oddly enough, her pop, he died mysteriously on his yacht in 1991, and that was named Lady Ghislaine. And then it goes to talk about this social club that she founded, the Kit Kat Club, a social organization for working women, and also served as director for a football club her father owned. Well, I bet you football players like women, so it probably went really well together. And if you watch my video from yesterday, we were talking about how Lady Ghislaine was doing some stuff with the Mirror back in the day in the 80s for Disney. And there are lots of kids going around in Disney. And of course, she likes to get kids for Epstein. She's the hookup chick, right? Very much like Rachel Chandler is nowadays. It's just a younger version of the same thing. It goes on to say here how she's talking about how she met Jeffrey Epstein as a strategic launch pad for her career as a New York City philanthropist and socialite. Okay, well, neither of those things our careers. That just happens when you already have money. And of course, we know about all these philanthropists these days. We know what they're doing. We know what they're really doing for all the children. They always seem to be so darn concerned with the children, right? Then it goes on to talk about some of these various lawsuits against Epstein. And some of the common themes here is that she's constantly mentioned in all of them. So she's very, very highly implicated. And just like Epstein right now is probably a high target for the deep state, they would love to see him removed at this point. We need him alive so that he can sing. I would imagine it's very much the same thing with Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, the Daily Beast actually did report a couple of weeks ago that she was found unresponsive, but I haven't seen anything corroborate that, so I'm not so sure. I don't really know exactly what's up with Ghislaine Maxwell, and I couldn't tell you exactly what's up with Epstein. I have a pretty good guess, but a guess isn't going to do it. But I would imagine that they are protected so they could sing because they know everything and they're named in everything. Let's move on. Post 3509, 54 minutes after the hour of 1, we get a link. Q says, coming soon to a theater near you. And it takes you right here to thehollywoodreporter.com. Tarantino billboards hijacked in LA to slam Epstein, Polanski, and Pedowood. And there it is right there. Pretty sweet. There's Polanski's face and Jeffrey Epstein, and this is covered up above the movie. I believe this is Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The giant billboard at Pico and La Cienega had been rented by Sony to advertise the film. And I just want to point out, that's a pretty high traffic area right there, so a lot of people got to see that. Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio no longer appear on several ads in Hollywood for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, as a conservative street artist has swapped their images with those of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and film director Roman Polanski. The giant billboard at Pico and La Cienega had been rented out by Sony to advertise the Quentin Tarantino movie that opened Thursday night. But Friday morning, not only have the photos of the actors been altered, but also the film's title, which now reads Once Upon a Time in Pedowood. The artist behind the alterations goes by the name Sabo, and he says that the faux ads are meant to insult the entertainment industry for embracing Polanski, who pled guilty to sex with a minor 4 decades ago, and to a lesser extent Epstein, who was arrested July 6 for sex trafficking of minors. A lesser extent, huh? He also noted that the backdrop of the movie is the 1969 Charles Manson murders, where the most high-profile victim was Sharon Tate, the actress who was married to Polanski at the time. Epstein wasn't as well known among the public as Polanski until his recent arrest, but he was a frequent guest at entertainment industry events on both coasts, even throwing dinner parties at his New York mansion attended by the likes of Katie Couric, Charlie Rose, Chelsea Handler, Child Handler, and George Stephanopoulos. Beyond the billboard, there are ads at numerous bus stops, some on benches and others behind glass. Insiders say a street crew worked through the night to get the phony ads in place before the sun rose on Friday. One bench ad uses an image of Woody Allen instead of Polanski, as Allen was accused of abusing his adopted daughter, Dylan Farrow, when she was 7. I felt they should all share a billboard to highlight a decades-old problem that has plagued Hollywood for decades, the abuse of children, Sabo said. And there's the bench right there, and you can see Woody Allen behind the wheel of the car, and I say you, sir, are an American hero. Now you're a man.
Now you're a man. A man, man, man. Now you're a man. A mounty, mounty, man. A man, man, man.
Post 3510, 57 minutes after the hour of 1. We get this YouTube link right here. Q says, do you remember? We do. And it takes you right here. This is a link to Joey Gibson's Patriot Prayer, posted on June 19, 2019. But this is an older video from back during the Obama administration. As there you can see on the Today Show, looks to be $2 Chuck Todd giving us the what for. It's about 7 minutes and 20 seconds long, but ain't nobody got time for that. So let's check it out a little bit condensed.
Oh, it's a montage, cause we ain't trying to watch the whole dang thing now.
Good morning, Savannah. You know, there's an old saying in Washington that the cover-up is worse than the crime. But in this case, both parts of it are disturbing. Allegations of prostitution and pedophilia, and allegations that those crimes were somehow covered up or not looked into. So the State Department this morning is having to respond to those claims and those investigations of misconduct by State Department officials, including by an ambassador and security agents attached to then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And the allegations are that these investigations were whitewashed, quashed altogether, and that those orders came from high up.
NBC News has obtained documents related to ongoing investigations into some disturbing allegations involving State Department personnel and at least one ambassador. A State Department memo says the ambassador, quote, routinely ditched his protective security detail in order to solicit sexual favors from both prostitutes and minor children. The memo also says a top State Department official directed department investigators to, quote, cease the investigation into the ambassador's conduct. It's just one of what another document describes as, quote, several examples of undue influence from top state officials.
The investigators somehow dropped the investigations, including into this ambassador and onto some other deal, including on folks that were part of security detail. So the allegations themselves haven't been fully substantiated by us, but this Inspector General whistleblower believes that the evidence was clear, but the problem was the investigation wasn't done in time to find out for sure if this misconduct was happening.
Q says, do you remember? We certainly do. We wouldn't forget about something like this. And this is, of course, talking about this ambassador that's being looked into. But this happened with Clinton as well as Hillary Clinton. And this has long been documented. Of course, it's coming out even more and more. I actually have personal conversations with somebody formerly assigned to Hillary Clinton's detail that stated directly years and years ago about these kind of activities. And yeah, so I imagine this will be coming out more and more. Remember, the Hillary Clinton emails were the situation that they wanted to go away, but the emails just basically led to the foundation and all the other kind of activities that were really going on. That's where we're going to probably find a lot of the disgusting stuff. The emails just lead us to those communications and what they led to and whatnot. But yeah, it looks like it's coming out more and more. And of course, Democrats are in a panic. Yesterday, they were all talking about impeachment, and it should be no surprise why at this point. Let's move on further to 3511. 2 minutes after the hour of 3, we get this RT link right here, and this is pretty disturbing stuff. UN warns Britain over child voodoo rituals, pedophile sex tourists. This was published back in 2014. Looks like it was on June 27th. Hundreds of children are being kidnapped in Africa and brought to the UK for voodoo rituals, a UN watchdog said, also voicing alarm about the number of British pedophiles who prey on children abroad. The United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child urged Britain to do more to stop this brutal form of people trafficking. It's pretty interesting that the United Nations is telling people how to act. We're concerned about reports that hundreds of children have been abducted from their families in Africa and trafficked to the UK, especially London, for religious rituals. Kristen Sandberg, head of the CRC and a former Norwegian Supreme Court judge, said Thursday. She said that trafficking for rituals was part of a wider problem where thousands of minors are brought to the UK who end up being child prostitutes or being sexually exploited. The CRC advised that Britain should strengthen the capacity of law enforcement authorities and judiciary to detect and prosecute trafficking of children for labor, sexual, and other forms of exploitation, including for religious rituals. There have been numerous cases of children who have been brought to the UK from Africa and suffered torture and abuse, often as part of witchcraft rituals, AFP reports. And then it goes on to talk about some of the, the stories that at that time would have been recent. This is really, really disturbing. Let me take you down here. The CRC also warned about the number of British pedophiles who traveled abroad, most notably to Southeast Asia, particularly Cambodia and Thailand, for sex with children. Orphanages were a favorite destination where sex predators could pick up on vulnerable kids. Yeah, and I want to point out, as somebody who's lived and worked a lot in Southeast Asia, it's right in front of your face, and so much of this, particularly in countries like Cambodia, you get out to the sticks out there, there's nothing for miles around, and then you get to these orphanages, and they've got next to nothing. So, pass the right people a little bit of cash and people will look the other way on a lot of things, including parents. It's disgusting, and it's going on, of course, in the UK more and more. And I think the citizens of the UK have really, really showed a lot of stones over the last couple of years, really with this Brexit ordeal. And trying to get conservatives and nationalism back into the public scope of knowledge, really trying to get people to understand that this is disgusting. And this is what really this whole open borders thing is all about. Of course, the U.S. has their own problems with this stuff too. Now, I just want to kind of give you a generalization here, but I do want to point out that this voodoo thing is also very common in the U.S., particularly in areas, obviously we know in New Orleans, but it's all over. And there's a spot in California California. I believe that really our hip hop community is deeply involved in this. I'd like to probably do some information, some other time, maybe make a video on some of that. But I would just suggest right now that, just like Hollywood has their own kind of pedophile rings, so does our music community, as you know. But particularly in the hip hop rings is where a lot of this voodoo stuff kind of tends to reside. It's long been this way. And as somebody who's been in the entertainment field all my life, I've been privy to some of this. It's pretty tripped out. And, if you remember earlier this year, just a few months back, Dr. John, the blues musician, died. And of course, he was big into voodoo, and he was a New Orleans guy. This stuff's long been around, and this is exactly what they do. But anyway, this was from back in 2014, and it says this is a BBC journalist posing as a children's trafficker trawled the bars and cafes of the Kampala underworld in Uganda in 2011. He found a kidnapper who boasted he could offer as many children as required without the police knowing for $15,000, $1,600 a child. Oh, my goodness. Now, I think it's interesting that Q posted this 2014 RT article right after showing us in 3510 this older NBC video talking about the former State Department. Now, the U.S. ambassador to the UK, that'd be Louis Sussman, and he, of course, also was a big-time Clinton donor. I'm not sure if that's who they're talking about. They could be talking about Clintons. They could be really talking about either Clinton if they're talking about the State Department, right? But it seems to me like we know that this goes all the way to the top of not just our government, but in the UK too. They like to have their own little tomfoolery too. And don't forget that Prince Andrew was on those Epstein flights. So this goes all the way to the top. And speaking of all the way to the top, we're going to go to 3512, 33 minutes after the hour 3. We get taken back to this post, 2791 from the 18th of February, 2019. Dan Coates forced out soon. Source, Trump friend Chris Rudy. And of course, that was former head of the DNI, Dan Coates. Interesting, this leaked already. Q-Post, fly, Dan, fly. Well, it looks like Dan Coates is on his way out the door, and we've seen Q post this before. Fly, Dan, fly. We've seen this with Rod Rosenstein, Linda Rothschild, lots of people. It could mean that they are finally singing. I tend to think too that this has something to do with surveillance and satellites too. I'm not really sure, but there's a lot of different schools of thoughts here. I do tend to think that it has to do. It always seems to pop up when people are being let go, or maybe giving the chance to do a little bit of singing. We get a little bit more insight in 3513. 33 minutes after the hour of 3. This Anon here says, Solomon on Hannity Radio. Next week, change of DNI, Coates gone, declass of docs, and Durham news. Said on the show, might be on Hannity tonight. Did not say that, but this is big, so watch Hannity. And Q confirms. And I'm just going to play you really the very end of the interview here. It's a radio interview. Check it out.
Preview of coming attractions next week and in the weeks to come.
I think there are three things to watch for. I think we should watch for a change at the top of the intelligence community, maybe Dan Coates moving on finally. 2, release of some unclassified documents, the declassification of documents related to Russia that detail the first abuses. And 3, perhaps the beginning of grand jury activities related to John Durham's investigation. Those are 3 things I'll be watching for the next couple of weeks.
Nice. And keep in mind that John Durham is in charge of investigating the investigators. That's right. He's basically investigating the origins of how this whole thing began, and it's about time that this dominate the news for the next few years as we start locking some of these knuckleheads up and getting into Operation Boomerang. All right, Patriots, that's all I got for you for now. I'm going to go out and try and enjoy a little bit of the weekend. I hope you will do the same. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that already. Thanks to all of you who like and share my videos. I greatly appreciate all the support and help. And if you're new to my channel, welcome to you. Please understand that you're going to get unclicked, unnotified, and unsubscribed. Happens all the time. I lose subscribers seriously on the daily. So do me a favor, just check back and re-notify yourself, resubscribe yourself. I would greatly appreciate it. All my alternate links are down below. Some of them are a little bit funky. They're not uploading that well. So just keep checking back. But my BitChute works pretty well. My DropSpace works pretty well right now. I'm also on Gab, Real.video. All those are linked down below. And, of course, I'm over at Twitter at IPOT1776. That's IPOT1776. If you're on Twitter, I highly suggest giving me a follow over there. We cover a lot of things that I don't get to here on YouTube, so give me a check at IPOT1776. All those links are down below. If you have email information for me, please email me, and my email is down below. If you'd like to send something old school, my P.O. box is down below as well. And if you'd like to support the channel, you guessed it, my Patreon link is down below. They're all down below in the video description. This is Sir Patrick Mack, and until next time, stay funky.